Tonight on BBC1. And look who's in training for the love of a good woman. But can he keep it up? More laughs at 7:30 as love finds 2 more victims. Well, at least Lionel seems happy. In Strathblair, there's suggestion of impropriety.
What are you suggesting anyway, Eileen White? Adultery? Or grievous bodily harm? Or both?
Then at 9:05, meet Resnick, an unorthodox detective who's about to solve a baffling crime. But he's dealing with some very unorthodox suspects.
There's something more complicated going on, and I can't set a finger on what it is.
What it is a great night on BBC1.
Superdogs will be put through their paces and hoops and tests of skill, speed and obedience in the 4th quarter-final of the National Challenge in 40 minutes. First on BBC1, it's the BBC being put to the test.
And welcome to the July edition of Biteback, and it's been a turbulent month at the BBC. The management style of its Director General, John Burt, was roundly attacked by one of its most distinguished correspondents, Mark Tully. Mr. Burt firmly rejected the charges made against him. A survey showed the BBC staff are proud to work for it, but don't feel safe saying what they really feel about it. Esther Ranson, one of its most famous presenters, was told her programme That's Life will be laid to rest after 21 years. And all that has been happening against a backdrop of falling audiences. In the last week of June, BBC1's share of the audience dropped below 30% for the first time in 8 years. So today on Biteback, we're focusing on the thinking behind the programmes that bring in the big audiences, drama and light entertainment, and discussing with the people who write, produce, watch and criticise those programmes what the BBC can do to bring the audiences back again. First, though, let's start with our regular look at some of your day-to-day complaints in what we call the hit list.
Petersburg, I presume.
Cole, I ain't been to any bleeding.
Producer Gareth Gwenlyn told Biteback, I would like to assure the audience that both the writer and myself take the utmost care and concern not to alienate our many and faithful viewers. Reading the morning papers with Sir David Frost was a bit like playing strip poker for Mirror executive Amanda Platel.
Amanda, it's your turn now. What are you going to pick on?
Well, I'd very much like to have a look at the story in the Sunday Mirror this morning about the...
Now, we do have a rule, by the way.
Oh, is there? I can't mention one of my own papers?
Every time you mention one of your own newspapers, you lose one article of clothing. All right, carry on.
Off with the jacket.
Yes.
Just as well I don't have any papers.
Mrs. Janet Lumsden from Stirling complained to Biteback. What a sexist comment. It was quite shocking in this day and age. This is no way to speak to a woman.
We asked Sir David for an explanation, and we got a message via his office saying, I'm too busy. What's this noise? Was the question on the brain drain.
Joe, here's yours. Pretty straightforward, what's that?
Yes, it sounds like me on a Friday night again, but I think it's probably the midwife who delivered David Mellor.
Brash and nasty.
Insulting, complained viewers.
This programme's about as funny as a smack from a wet kipper, moaned Mrs. Williams from Shanklin.
Producer Dan Patterson told Biteback, I note these comments with great interest and can reveal that they were all made by members of my own family who are deeply ashamed that I have become a comedy producer. I just want to say, Mum, Dad, stop it. It's too late. I'm not going to become a lawyer now. Anyway, the brain drain has increased its audience by 30% and lots of people like it. So there.
Well, the complaints you made there pale into insignificance compared with your concerns about BBC programmes as a whole. There aren't enough of them that you like, and you're switching over. The BBC's admitted that it's facing a large problem. Alan Yentov, the controller of BBC1, said this week that the corporation needed to broaden its appeal. Well, here with us to talk about what's been happening and why and how it might be improved are people who've written, produced some of the BBC's most successful programmes, such as Birds of a Feather, EastEnders, Have I Got News for You, and critics who support the organisation but who are anxious about its future. There's no doubt that it's in the area of drama and entertainment that the real problem lies, and we'll have a look at that more closely in a minute. But first, a report on the consequences of not having enough good new programmes to fill the schedules. What broadcasters call archive programmes, but you call repeats, now litter the schedules. This week they make up more than a quarter of peak time programmes, and you've been making your disapproval very plain, as Richard Jobson reports.
A quiet Saturday night in front of the box. Saturday night on BBC1, a great night for comedy. At 7:20, open all hours. First shown only 17 years ago. It's now a classic. This one's been on 3 times, last seen in 1991.
It wasn't her, was it?
No.
Thank God for that.
I do love situations.
It's followed by Birds of a Feather. It's only the 3rd time it's been on.
You are hopeless, Lord. You are a complete traitor to the women's movement.
As far as I'm concerned, Sharon, the women's movement is what you do with your pelvis.
You saw this only a matter of months ago.
Welcome to the House of Elliot.
And Spender's back in a repeat of the first series from 1991. Seems like it's never gone away.
This is not the sort of trio you're likely to see on the BBC at any time, but it is what's happening on BBC1 at the moment, and viewers have had enough.
Just damn disgusting. This repeats, it's all repeats. The only thing it isn't a repeat is the news.
Programmes like Open All Hours, The Good Life, Porridge, Dad's Army, those kind of programmes, I think they should just be locked away in a cupboard and the key thrown away for the next 10 years and don't get them out until, you know, until we all haven't seen them for a while.
They have a cheek in that they're asking me to watch repeats, which they are repeating repeatedly.
For some viewers, it's just all too much. Saturday night is the worst, but there are repeats on every night of the week. A quarter of the programmes on the BBC are repeats. In the last week, there were almost 12 hours of them on BBC1 in the evenings, and some of the programmes are now really old, like The Good Life, first made in 1975, and it certainly looks like it.
Tom, I do. What is that?
2 dustbins on a trolley. The schedule is beginning to look very stale now. Many repeats have simply gone well past their sell-by date, like Dad's Army, which has been running since 1968. They stopped making it in 1977, but it's still on. For many viewers, though, the final straw was an episode of Casualty, shown in June. It was set at Christmas.
Now, it may be that the BBC thinks we all spend our time outside during the summer and that nobody watches television, so it doesn't really matter what they put on. But the fact is there are some people who don't go out, even on a Saturday night, and they enjoy spending their time in front of the box.
I do get a bit fed up when I see the same old programmes coming again and again. It's not so bad in the winter, of course, because there's a great effort in the autumn to put good programmes on, but somehow the whole thing slips during the summer holidays, and as if the BBC's given up and doesn't care whether people watch television or not.
I think the problem with the BBC and this summer is quite simply that it's run out of money. But I think what we're seeing now, especially on a Saturday night, is perhaps a new scheduler trying to reinvent the wheel, and just too many in a row on a Saturday night, and not all fitting together.
What are you doing? Fitting you off! Well, don't you like it? Oh, it's dreadful. Embarrassing, is it? Yes, it's perfectly awful. Disgraceful. I don't know how they got the nerve to put it on.
ITV are also showing repeats, but far fewer, about half what the BBC show, so more people are switching over to ITV.
I mean, I do. I watch The Bill, which I've never watched. I didn't even like it, but I watch it now. because it's on a Saturday night.
On Saturdays, the BBC is trailing behind ITV. Moving the bill from Friday to Saturday night is winning the summer's ratings battle.
Saturday night is very important to ITV. The summer is quite a fruitful period for audience watching. If it gets very, very hot, which most often in Britain it doesn't, then audience figures go down. But when we're in our normal temperate or rainy climate, the figures can still be pretty high, as we see from, as you say, shows like The Bill, Stars in Their Eyes are getting between 8 and 10 million viewers. So they're there to watch even in the summer on a Saturday night.
The BBC are failing in their duty to provide me and others with a service. They have a large income. In my opinion, they are not using it properly.
Yeah, the BBC ain't worried about wasting money, mate. It ain't their money, is it? It's ours.
It's not yours. You ain't got a licence.
Shut up!
No one disputes that the BBC has some of its best-loved programmes in its archives. Millions still enjoy them. But viewers criticise the BBC for showing too many repeats. And there's also a problem with where they're put in the schedule.
The scheduling part of the BBC brain is missing. I mean, it's remarkable that the pieces are in a jigsaw, a compendium, but they're not in the right place. There really is no excuse for putting a programme on at a time when the audience for that programme is not there. And House of Elliot is a classic example. It got 9 million viewers around 9 o'clock on a Sunday. It moved to around 7 o'clock on a Saturday, and it went down to 3.5 million viewers. Why was that? Because the audience at 7 o'clock on a Saturday is not the right audience for House of Elliot. So then they moved it back.
You don't fill prime time. You can fill time the beginning and the end of the day if you want, but not prime time.
There really is no rationale for BBC1 if it isn't popular. It should be quality popular, because that is the BBC stamp. But it has got to be first and foremost popular.
I think usually the BBC is very good value when you consider you've got 2 channels and the radio. But I just think at this moment the BBC seems to be going through a very low period when it seems to have run out of ideas as to what to put on and to know what viewers actually want.
Well, thank you for a very interesting programme. Oh, not at all, thank you.
Yes, that was very nice.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And good night.
Well, of course, those repeats are there because the BBC hasn't been making enough new programmes that are broadly popular. And Alan Yentop has acknowledged that. It's undoubtedly the nub of the problem the corporation faces over ratings as a whole. Nevertheless, he's taken his axe, as I mentioned, to That's Life, which he judges to be running out of steam. And there are rumoured to be other entertainment classics due to suffer a similar fate. And of course, El Dorado, which never seemed to work up much steam in the first place, finished last week. Well, before we discuss the rights and wrongs of that situation, let's focus more closely on the drama department. Joanna Kay has been looking at its recent failures and indeed its successes.
On location with Between the Lines, the award-winning BBC drama series starring Neil Pearson as policeman Tony Clark.
It's set in the Complaints Investigation Bureau of the Metropolitan Police. So as complaints come in from the public about police, either procedural ones or about policemen, specific policemen, they are investigated by this department.
Tony Garnett is the executive producer of Between the Lines. He's one of the best-known figures in British television. Past credits include Cares, Cathy Come Home and the controversial 60s Wednesday play series. Between the Lines attracts 7 million viewers, healthy but not as good as the BBC would like.
I very much hope that more people will watch it. If they don't, then never blame, I say to all the young people who's working for me now, never ever blame the viewer. Always blame the programme. It's always the programme's fault. And I don't know whether we'll do any better or not. We're trying to retain the moral ambiguity in the show. We're trying to retain the narrative complexity, but we're trying also to be clear. Clarity of storytelling, I hope, will help us to build the viewers. If we don't, it's our fault.
But Between the Lines is thought by many nowadays to be one of those rare animals at the BBC, a successful drama. Whilst no one would deny that series like Casualty and Lovejoy are a big hit, the BBC desperately needs to revive its reputation, damaged by a string of highly publicised disasters.
The foreign accents became so impenetrable that you could watch it for 5 minutes and you just didn't know what anyone had said or why they'd said it or who they were talking about.
The subject matter, I'm quite sure, about training racehorses and the people involved should have been an interesting topic and subject, but it wasn't at all. It was very, very just bland and uninteresting. Mediocre, I would use.
It's rather funny because I only watched the first one and it was just a nothing.
I think with the BBC dramas, even the most successful ones like Casualty and House of Eliot, there's a kind of predictability and inevitability about what's going to happen in the dramas. Or alternatively, if they try and do something unexpected, you just don't believe it.
It's very easy to put together a shopping list of things you may think the audience will find attractive. Racehorses or Spanish Sun. But unless you've actually rooted all those things in a believable situation, characters that people want to spend time with and who they find interesting, they can put themselves in their position. And you only do those things through good writing. Then you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money.
Body and Soul was one of ITV's hits this season. Its producer believes the BBC material just isn't up to scratch.
All the things that they wanted to make which have now been cancelled, like El Dorado and Rides and Trainer, all those kind of shows, certainly initially with El Dorado and the others, I think the scripts were bad and I think the casting was bad. And you can never really recover from that.
Thank God you've come back.
This is your fault.
Accident. Well, I think scripts are of paramount importance to any production, and you have to keep working at it to make them right, in my opinion. I mean, I've actually gone to 13 drafts of something just on one particular episode of a series I did, just to make it right.
While the criticisms about BBC drama roll in, ITV continues to produce programmes that the BBC can only watch and envy.
We've got to take Nola Cameron's fears seriously.
In this document, in which the BBC sets out its aims for the future, it says that the corporation should be the national theatre of the airwaves. Well, it's certainly well-resourced. With an annual budget of £200 million, the drama department takes the biggest slice of the BBC cake. But biggest doesn't necessarily mean best.
Basically, their problem is they haven't got the good long-running drama series like Taggart, London's Burning, Heartbeat, Peak Practice, which get an audience of 13, 14, 15, 16 million. BBC's bests get about 10 million, things like Lovejoy and Love Hurts. So they are losing by more than the neck, by several lengths.
The BBC points to its historic list of programme triumphs upon which its worldwide reputation is built. But are those programmes like Forsyte Saga and Z-Cars treasures from a golden age, now gone for good?
When I first started in the 60s, BBC1 and ITV dominated television, and people seemed to be more devoted to television. So it was much easier then, although it didn't seem so at the time, it was much easier then to create a national event. You could put on a piece of drama which the next morning it seemed the whole nation was talking about.
Always the best kind of costume drama and the most serious drama was always done by the BBC. And now they're trying to get into popular drama because the competition is so great, what with your Channel 4 and satellite and videos and movies are coming back. They obviously need to increase their ratings, and that's why they're, I suppose, panicking about it.
I think we should pay far less attention to prizes that people in the business spend a lot of time giving to each other, far less attention to the critics, particularly in the broadsheets, and far more attention to whether we're actually communicating what we feel about the world to the audience at large. In the end, they pay our wages.
So, here with me to talk about why the BBC has been losing the audience and, more importantly, how it might win it back are Corinne Hollingworth. She's a freelance producer of popular drama whose credits include EastEnders and who was responsible latterly for the improvement in El Dorado. Jimmy Mulville, a former BBC radio and television producer who made, among other things, Alas, Smith and Jones, is currently presenting The Brain Drain and is, of course, one of the brains behind Have I Got News for You? Then there's Lawrence Marks, who writes exclusively at the moment for the BBC and who, together with Maurice Gran, his partner, has created a string of hits, most recently including Birds of a Feather and Love Hurts. And Chris Dunkley, the television critic of the Financial Times and presenter of radio's equivalent of Biteback, Feedback. Apart from that panel of experts, there are plenty of people in our studio audience with very strong views on the subject. But we don't, I'm afraid, have anyone here from the management of the BBC. Those we invited were unable to join us. Let's start by analysing the problem. First of all, Corinne Hollingworth, why do you think the BBC has had this series of flops? Why hasn't it been able to produce things, as we've seen ITV has, Peak Practice, Heartbeat, Taggart, London's Burning, The Bill, so on?
I think it's partially about commitment and loyalty to an idea. I mean, I hate to hark back to the sort of golden age of the BBC, but I do believe that in the past, the BBC made programmes because there were individuals there who wanted to make those programmes. They were committed to the idea, and the audience, to a degree, was incidental. I do believe if you make something with sufficient belief in the product, then the audience will follow. I think there is a cynicism that's abroad at the BBC now, which puts the size of the audience before the idea. So you enter into the whole production-making process thinking, how can we get a huge audience? Now, ITV somehow seems to have a more innocent approach to it. Seems to be able to
believes in what it's doing.
It absolutely believes in what it's doing, but it doesn't have the moral dilemma of, you know, should we be a public service broadcaster? Should we be fulfilling a remit about individuality and distinction? ITV just makes programmes for entertainment's sake and succeeds.
We'll come back around to that in a moment and to your point about cynicism at the BBC. What's your experience, Jimmy Mulville, as a very successful independent producer who makes programmes both for the BBC and for ITV? Is there a difference in the way you're treated by those two organisations?
Not a lot, no. I'd say that the difference these days, when I first joined the BBC in 1978 as a radio producer, there was a lot of committed people around. And that they in fact went on to in fact, John Lloyd left there to produce Not the 9 O'Clock News, and he was a very passionate, committed person, and he had to climb a mountain to get not the 9 O'Clock News on, as indeed you should, because it was a new programme. However, once he got the programme going, he was backed up by the then head of BBC 2. He may have had his wrists slapped occasionally in public, but behind the scenes they were 100% behind him. And the way we produce shows now is that if we like the idea, we are passionate about it. And I think what's happened is the BBC no longer is the only place where young people, young producers will go with their ideas. There's the Independent sector now, Channel 4 and ITV. I think the BBC now has to lift its head up and start bringing people in who have the good ideas.
Let me bring in Lawrence Marks, because we're hearing there about passion and commitment and a lack of confidence, a lack of all of these things. Is that your perception of what's gone wrong with drama? Just address drama for a moment, if you would.
I have to say that my experience of the BBC is slightly different to yours, because there, as writers, we go in and say we would like to do this given project, and normally they say go away and do it, and they don't bother us other than budgeting it until we actually deliver them tape.
But you go back a long way. You've proved yourself over, what, 20 years
yes,
more?
But I also have to say that we didn't work for the BBC until Birds of a Feather. So I suppose that producing for them a hit comedy gave us the entree to drama. Quite frankly, I hesitate to say this, but I think the people that commission the programmes aren't the right people to do the job. And so you get people that have to fill slots rather than knowing what they want to fill in the hot seat. People that can say, it seems to me there are a lot of people at the BBC that can say no, but very few that can say yes.
So it's lost its touch, is that what you're saying?
I think so.
That there aren't any guts and any instinct?
I think so.
Chris Dunkley, I mean, you studied these things from the outside a lot. I mean, one argument could be that there is a pendulum in these things, that quite often ITV suddenly gets many more viewers than the BBC. The pendulum will swing back, or do you sense here a deeper malaise?
It's certainly true that if you look back over the years, that has tended to happen, that there has been, a period when ITV have been on the up, and then a period when the BBC have, and it's probably round about the BBC's turn now. I think that actually, if you use that as an analysis and simply sit back and assume that next the BBC are going to be the successful ones, you'd be in grave danger, because the technology which is affecting the whole of the industry is beginning to destroy that possibility. There was a time when it was just really a parallelogram. There was the BBC and there was ITV, and Channel 4 complicated that a bit, but on the whole, that was what it was. We're now beginning to get cable, satellite, and so on, which is making that much more difficult. But more than that, it seems to me that if the argument here tonight is the BBC is failing to make Taggart, it's failing to make Heartbeat, that isn't the point. I mean, if the BBC is simply going to set out to reproduce what ITV does successfully, that's not the BBC. What the BBC has done so successfully throughout its history is to push things forward. Whether it was Shakespeare or Z-Cars, it actually had the courage to let people have their head and do things that were dangerous.
So why isn't that happening at the moment?
I think because you have an organisation now which is not set up in quite the same way as it was before. I think there's a much more prescriptive sense inside the BBC now. And there is also a very definite bias towards journalism, probably, and that at the moment, as it happens, under the people who are running the BBC, there's possibly less interest at a high level in drama, in light entertainment, in variety and so on, than there once was. And it's very much a journalistic organisation.
Could that explain then why we were hearing earlier on here from Corinne and from Jimmy a lack of confidence and trust?
Absolutely. I mean, unless you have people who are saying, we will let these people go out and take risks and fail dismally if necessary, because of course we don't sit around and talk about the failures. We don't look back to the 70s and say, oh my God, that was awful. There were awful things. What we remember, there are great ones, but you don't get the great ones without risk.
But what do you want that you're not getting? Gillian Hutton, what do you want to see there?
Well, I was going to say that you're looking for entertainment, basically, aren't you, when you switch the television on. And I was going to say that I've been finding things like Prime Suspect and Peak Practice on ITV. I do agree that BBC can't copy those programmes, but if those sort of ideas are around, why aren't BBC getting some of them?
What about you, Helen Murphy? What do you want?
Well, from what I see, ITV have made a success of things such as Beagles About, and it all seems to come from the one seed when they had Game for a Laugh. They've taken one very good idea, realised that people like watching themselves being however silly, and they've expanded on that. And out of that, what have they got? They've got You've Been Framed, they've got Beagles About, and look at the viewing figures. The critics may not like it, but the audience do.
You like people programmes? I mean, I think that's what they're generally called.
That's right.
That have lots of people on them. There's the Generation Game, which has been rehashed, of course, on the BBC.
Yes, but again, it's an old format. It's not a new idea, and I think people look for something different.
Noel's House Party is very good and a successful example of that. But it's only one. I mean, Lawrence Marks, do you think there's a point there that ITV decided to be format-led, as it were, and not to book the stars unless it had a good vehicle to put them in?
Well, yes, I think you can't... The BBC take, for example, Terry Wogan under contract and suddenly stop his 3 nights a week show, then they've got to find him something else. I wouldn't personally cast him in any comedy we wrote because I don't think he's a very good actor. So you then have to say, what does he do? What does he do other than sit with people and talk to them? And the answer is probably very little. So there they are, left with a huge financial deficit of Terry Wogan and no programme. But I also think, as Chris said, it is cyclical, and I do think that the time will come, and it won't be very long, when the BBC start producing some good comedies and some good dramas, and we might be sitting here and asking what the BBC are doing right.
They do actually, to be fair, produce some good comedy. I mean, there's French and Saunders.
Sure.
And
I think it has to be said as well that BBC situation comedy is still leagues ahead of ITV situation comedy. I mean, it's in a completely different
It's very strong. It's not just because you're sitting next to Lawrence Marks, is it?
No, it isn't. Although he did pay me beforehand to say that.
It's variety, it's entertainment we're talking about. I mean, do you think, Jimmy, that it should be format-led? Do you think the format is more important than
anything? I think that the good idea starts with the producer. And I don't think it's wise for the BBC to go around spending vast amounts of money. Obviously, they have to secure artists, otherwise ITV will snap them up. But I wonder if the same people who secured the artists went around securing the producers to produce those artists. Because as we've seen time and again, you know, big stars moving across from the BBC to ITV, Morecambe and Wise, Kenny Everett made it the other way. Without the producer who was there at the beginning, who inspired the artist to do what he did, or she did, they lose the producer and they lose that special quality of that show that made it so good.
But it's not, I don't think it's format-led. I think it's back to this business of having people at the top with the courage to let the people below them have their head. If you look at Antiques Roadshow, nobody could have prescribed it. If you look at Mastermind, nobody could have prescribed it. If you look at That Was the Week That Was, nobody could have prescribed it. What you've got to have is people who are saying, okay, get on with it. Let your people with the good ideas try them out. Maybe they'll fall flat on their faces. But do it, and then you get these extraordinary hits.
It's also true, isn't it? Can I just say this? It's also true, isn't it, that you've got to have the confidence to hang on in there with something when it doesn't
Yes, we did a
succeed in the first
We did a
place.
pilot of Have I Got News For You, which was possibly the worst programme ever made. And we took it to the BBC, and the then head of feature department, Colin Cameron, and Alan Yentob, who was then controller of the BBC2, backed it, and we did a series of Have I Got News For You. If they had lost their nerve, we wouldn't have done Have I Got News For You, and it wouldn't have been a successful
Colin,
show.
should they have hung on with El Dorado? I have to
Well,
ask you that. Of course you would say they should,
I have to say yes. I mean,
I
according
think
to...
the question is this: do you think a more confident BBC would have hung on with El Dorado, and do you think by now it would have turned the corner?
Well, I think it had turned the corner by the time it was taken off, but then again, I'd have to say that, wouldn't I? I do think that 5 years ago, the BBC would have hung on to it. And it's a difficult question, really, because at what point do you decide that Trainer is a truly awful idea and there is no point in making another series? With Casualty, it got something like 7 million viewers in its first series. Now, we were getting something like 7 million viewers by the end, and we were not given an extension. Now, they decided in those days to carry on with Casualty, and it was proved to be right, because now it is just about the only really populist success that the BBC has in
Belinda
terms of
Price, you
Arnold
were there
drama.
complaining on the film about all these repeats. What do you think of what you've heard so far?
Well, it feels rather elitist to me, listening to people who actually make programmes, because I wonder what kind of involvement there is from the viewers before programmes actually get put out on air. You're talking about the pilot you made of Have I Got News For You. Who watched that apart from the producer? Did any viewers have a look at it
There
at
were
that
300
stage?
people in the audience who laughed twice.
Right.
So, had in fact we gone by what the audience on the day said, we wouldn't have made the programme.
Right. Well, that answers my question.
Janet Samuel, what about you? What do you want to say?
With ITV, they are producing entertainment. When I turn my TV set on, I turn it on to be entertained. We're living in a recession right now. There's enough misery going on. And although I do enjoy a good drama sometimes, I like the people programmes, and I like to be entertained. And that's what keeps me sitting there or lying there on my sofa watching the TV.
There's a problem here, though, facing Alan Yentob, isn't there, Chris Dunkley? Because he said this week that he wants to get back that mass audience. They've got to make programmes with broader appeal. He's also charged, as we know from Extending Choice, with making innovative programmes, programmes of distinction that would not be made anywhere else. Is that an impossible task?
It begins to look very, very difficult in the modern world, where you've got a sequence of governments which have insisted that British broadcasting become more and more market-driven. I mean, if you allow ITV, or not allow, but insist that ITV become more and more driven by, does it make a buck, does it make a pound, and then you say the BBC has got to go on and compete against them, but it's got to do all these other things, and it's got to be innovative and not merely copy, that's very nearly an impossible thing to do. In the past, the BBC, astonishingly, has proved extraordinarily good at doing that.
Has he done the right thing in cancelling That's Life, and we understand he's going to cancel and create great holes
probably.
in his schedule?
Yes. You can't let it go
Has
on
he
forever.
done the right thing, audience? Do you feel that's... It had run out of steam. Nobody wanted to defend it. Anybody want to defend El Dorado? Not just because she's here. But
I think it was getting a lot better towards the end.
it's a high-risk strategy, though, isn't it, to create those holes in your schedule. Lawrence?
I think it's very good. Sorry.
Well, all I was going to say is that, as a writer, that it's your gut that tells you whether a show's going to be good or not. And if Maurice and I were to write a show, having been commissioned, that we thought just wasn't working for us as writers, I would quite frankly go back to the BBC and say cancel it, or we don't want to do anymore. And at the end of the day, it is your gut, and all you can do is put it on and hope people like it. And fortunately, more of what we do is liked than disliked. But I don't know why that is.
But what we're saying at the moment, I think, or what you were saying earlier, is that the guts aren't good at the moment at the BBC.
No, but
they
that's
might...
because the BBC commissioned the wrong programme.
Let me ask Matt, what's your view on it?
I agree with that entirely. I think that what we've seen is a really strong attack on the core of the BBC from the four panellists, which is that there is a crisis at the heart of what is going on, and it comes through onto the screens, and you can feel it.
What do you mean by a crisis?
A crisis of confidence about what they're supposed to be doing. And I think, you know, a program that I think has come as a success over the last few years is something like Video Diaries, which is the most scrawny little idea. It just doesn't have any kind of sexy qualities to it, and yet, scrappy as it was, however low budget, it completely compelled people and has proved incredibly successful. It's about taking risks.
Yeah.
It is worth taking risks.
Yeah, I was going to say, the point you came back to before was you said about people in the BBC being passionate. Well, I think actually as an audience and as people watching the TV, I personally am very, very passionate actually in wanting to receive good quality, very challenging drama in a socio-political context and in a formal context as well. And that is what I would really like to see more of.
Chris Dunkley, if the BBC can't pull it off, if the pendulum doesn't swing back this time, and if there goes on being what there has been for some 2.5 years now, a 7 or 8 point differential between ITV, as in Channel 3, and BBC1, what is the point at which it becomes difficult to justify the licence fee?
That precise figure has been debated, believe me, in great detail inside the BBC for many years. There was a point just after commercial television started in this country when ITV, well, 2 years after, ITV took 79% of the audience and left the BBC with 21%. And that is a watershed inside the BBC. Nobody has ever forgotten it. And they learned at that point that they had to make not just Animal, Vegetable, Mineral and Shakespeare and orchestral programs. They had to learn how to make comedies that would appeal and be very popular and at the same time be respected. And they produced Steptoe. And they produced The Tonight programme. And they produced TW3. Now, it seems to me that unless they can go forwards and have another, if necessary, brilliant revolution, and you can't, you know, how can you prescribe that? Unless they can do that, they will in fact be driven out of business. Because if they reach a point where they're only getting, say, what, 29, 30% of the audience, the politicians will say, well, my constituents won't pay the licence fee.
John Burt has predicted that by the turn of the century it could only be broadcasting to 1/3 of the audience.
I think that was one of the silliest things ever said in public about broadcasting. I mean, I think that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell your staff that's all that's going to happen, that's what they'll do.
Well, let me end by asking each of you for one sentence of advice, if you like, for the BBC as it faces the future and attempts to regain lost ground. Corinne Hollingworth.
I think it's that we have to go back to brass tacks and be committed to our own ideas of what we want to see on television. I don't believe anybody ever made a successful programme that they didn't want to watch themselves, that they weren't absolutely committed to.
They didn't believe in themselves.
They didn't believe in.
Jimmy Melville.
Well, of course, they should commission Patrick. A lot more. But I'm not really in the advice-giving business. I think they've got a big problem. What I would like to say is I think this conversation should have taken place about a year ago, really, because what's happened is that they've hit a rock bottom, and this is a very good thing, because now real change will actually happen. I think what will happen is that over the next 3 or 4 years, the BBC will come back, and it will be different, and it'll be leaner, and it will be a lot stronger. I do believe that.
I think they have to reconsider budgeting for talent and not administration.
Chris Duncan.
I think they have to somehow recapture what they've had in the past, all the way from the Second World War, which was this extraordinary ability to combine journalism and show business somehow and keep the two together. If it simply becomes a journalistic organisation, it can forget it. It's got to have that show business flair.
Thank you, all four of you. Thank you very much indeed. And our studio audience, thank you. That's it for this side of the summer. We launch again in the new autumn schedules of the BBC in September. Please keep ringing and writing in between times. You're the viewers, and at the end of the day, like the man on the telly said, it's only your views that count. Enjoy the summer. Goodbye. You can write to us at Biteback, P.O. Box 2855, London W60ZH. And please include your telephone number or call us on the Biteback hotline on 081 741 3715.
In an emergency, dial 000.
They got problems.
Don't touch him till we got a rope on him!
Mickey, what is going on? That's an order, damn it.
Just take it easy. Easy, boys.
Living on the Edge. Police Rescue. Wednesday at 8 on BBC1. Dinosaurs down under and underwater.
It's always an excitement to be in the water alongside such a huge animal, an animal with such power.
This is a whale shark, a creature so big and so rarely seen, it's been called the dinosaur of the deep.
Every time I look into the eye of a whale shark, I really wonder, what is he thinking? Who's in there? What's going on in that head?
The Whale Shark, the Dinosaur of the Deep. Tomorrow at 7 on BBC1.
Action without the bared teeth now on BBC1 in an essentially friendly encounter for the super dogs.